Good evening, everyone. Just trying a test method to communicate in between class. So you'll see in the Google shared file folder uh, four subfolders, and each one should identify itself to you for the research project that you've taken on. The purpose of this announcement is really just to help give some guidance and focus because when you open up the main folder, you'll just see a whole bunch of documents. And then those documents are generally, I would describe as just documents that are good background information for students generally. So that includes actually a fully downloadable textbook on Indigenous international human rights. In the subfolders, just to make this quick, you'll find the beginnings of the documents that will help you, of course, in addition to anything else that you wish to add and contribute to. And again, your individuated project is part of, and always will be part of an ongoing discussion that we'll have throughout the weeks ahead. So the deliverable going into this week, you'll recall that we are on a reaction paper format. And as we evolve, what I'd like to see is within the same theme of taking a first brush at the materials, your thoughts in writing on what you've just read, which raises the most obvious question, what should I read within my own subfolder? The easy part, for example, is on the legal standing of rivers. So that's you'll see that legal personality and standing. So if that's your research area, and you'll know if it is or not, just simply because we've already talked. You'll see that there's only a few articles in there, and I think the article by Ecclestein from Texas A&M is the leading article, and he's really the leading scholar, I think, in the United States on this area. And so really it would be looking at that, I think, as the first brush, because that article will give you some of the basic legal parameters and the legal structure surrounding the personhood status of a river. And then likewise with regard to the Ryoyaki catfish, you'll see the two behind me, good friends of mine. These are the former residents at the Sonora Desert Museum, by the way. I can talk more about that later. But for the Ryoyaki catfish, I think the foundational document is going to be the Recovery Act, and it has this kind of lime green um, cover page. I believe it was 1995 is when it was issued. It was somewhere in the 90s. You'll see it. It's kind of glaring, and that'll give you some of the background information. I've also downloaded a couple of articles. The High Country News article I appear in that gives a contemporary story of how the U.S. Was struggling to preserve the remaining population and reintroduce it. And so those are some very quick articles. So again, if you're going into the week and thinking, okay, gosh, now that I have my kind of assignment, what do I do? Again, we go back to the baseline of what the course requires, and it's your reflections, your thoughts, and your really first impressions when you take the first brush through the materials. So, just like with the legal personality of the river question, that article will help outline for the reader what some of the foundational legal sources are, which I'm curious in understanding and knowing what your thoughts are on that. Likewise, with the Recovery Act, I'm curious to understand some of the factual details. Believe it or not, I actually don't have as strong a grasp of the facts. Um, Particularly in relation to what the U.S. committed to in the Recovery Act. So, kind of a general description of the Recovery Act would be very, very helpful, and maybe combining that with some of the short articles. You'll see there's also a Yale Climate article uh, on a 360 blog, is what it's called, that I downloaded as well for that. And then likewise, turning to the binational water management question. That's its own subfolder. There's a really interesting article. It's part of a book that was published. I believe it was published in partnership with the International Joint Commission, which is the Canada-US overseeing body. And that chapter is there on the rights of Indigenous peoples. I would just take a look at that and just start to begin scoping out what some of the primary sources are for the rights of Indigenous peoples before the IJC. In other words, what can they expect? I think that article will be very helpful in introducing students to the role of the IJC. And as we go through that exercise, remember that we're looking at models, because in the end, with the three subfolders that I've discussed so far, we're trying to think of models that we can later apply to the Rio Yaqui situation, which happens to occur on a binational basin, which also includes indigenous cultural and environmental patrimony, such as the Rio Yaqui catfish. So finally, turning to the fourth subfolder, that's the friendly settlement. I have the English version as well as the original Spanish version. Just as a side note, I have to find the federal department in Mexico that deals with external affairs and dealt with this case was called SEGUB. So it was not the Indigenous Affairs portfolio, while, however, INPI, which is the Indigenous Affairs portfolio, that department was the primary lead for negotiating the agreement. SEGUB, which is an executive secretarial department, it's a little bit like foreign affairs and internal affairs at the federal level. That department had carriage for this file. So it also reflects the unique constitutional and governance structure of Mexico at the federal level. So the lead attorney, her name was Miss Nancy Desarrollos. She was the lawyer who sent me the final signed version. The signed version that I have is in there. That's from 2023, late 2023, when the first round of signatures were made, including that of Governor Alfonso Durazo, governor of Sonora, which was very important. Conagua was also a signatory to that. So some of this is repetition with respect to student discussions already, but in that agreement, there's going to be some interesting portions. There's a subchapter on reconciliation, and that portion also deals with the reserved rights of the Yaqui Pueblos, as well as some of the undertakings that the parties agree to vis-a-vis acquiring, pursuing, and supporting one another in getting outside resources to do the implementation of the agreement. Just as a little divergence, and I'll repeat this again, the Friendly Settlement Agreement, as I describe it to people, is really two documents in one. One is a very formalistic document that is in the tradition of Mexican civil law. That document, and you can quickly get into the pages, which starts at the first page. That document reads like a series of promises and commitments by various federal departments and the state. That includes upwards of 14 federal departments. And there's even some examples, I think, of the undertakings that they're going to continue to pursue within each department, like the Ministry of Transportation, for example. So there's that piece. The piece that I really focused on was this idea of reconciliation, which is more of a common law, human rights-based approach to agreement making. And so we can talk about that more later. But really, that's the part that I think I'd be interested in hearing student reflections on. So the student that's been assigned that and has wanted to do that work, you know who you are. So just to help summarize and encapsulate our conversations. And that's it. So I just wanted to establish that the subfolders are open and ready. I've identified some of the basic key core areas for initial research. You are encouraged to add more as we proceed. What you can expect is building out a very short reaction paper format, based on the materials that I've provided. And that should really just read as an explanation of what you've read and your thoughts and impressions. We'll have some dialogue, and then we'll dig a little deeper. And hopefully, as this progresses with the introduction of client contact, you'll have a much rounder and more robust impression and understanding of the situation. But also, I think really interestingly enough, you'll also be able to make some applications because we're looking at models of governance as well. So that's it for now. Thanks for listening, and we will be in touch very soon. Thank you and have a good evening.